And what we have here is how to find the slope. So this is, I don't think it's too difficult, but it is just like geometry. It does have a couple of formulas. When we looked at the task exercises though, that formula was on there. So let me find that. Hopefully everyone made it through there just to practice. And you can practice more than one style of task test just to get an example. And then of course you can practice again. I'll remind everyone when we're about to go back to the campus so that you can get another couple of days of practice. But in this one where it just said the task portal, I'm going to log into the math one again real quick. So when you look at this reference sheet, it has something, it has volume, like we were talking about in the last chapter, but it also has the slope formula here. So M is what's standing for the slope. And then of course, we're picking out 2 points. So it's got X with a 1 underscore and a 2, and a Y with a 1 and a 2, because there are actually 2 points. So the X1 and Y1 go together, the X2 and the Y2 go together. And like we're saying, you don't necessarily have to memorize this, but you want to be familiar with it. So this is what is coming up after this first page. So this first page is just talking about the quadrants, which I saw some people's quizzes from yesterday. If you haven't done that one, you still have until Friday to do them. But basically, you just want to know how to plot 1 point. So this one is showing that the ordered pair is a X, comma, Y. And we said you just remember to go in alphabetical order. X is always first, and X is always the left to right point, where you're looking on this line that's going from left to right. Y is always second, and this is on the up and down line. Or the vertical line. So what you're going to do is when you see an ordered pair, whatever the first number is, you're looking for it from left to right. Whatever the second number is, you're looking for it up and down. And then you're remembering to go counterclockwise. So quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then as a starting point, the origin is always 0, 0. So if you do think of it as directions or, you know, some of the things like we mentioned, bingo or battleship or any kind of coordinates like that, you want to think of it as, you know, I'm going to start from 0 and go left or go right. From that point is where I go to the Y. So this one, that would be over in between the 3 and the 4 and up in between the 1 and the 2. So you don't want to, you know, you only want to start at the origin once. So example number 1 is what we did in Math is Fun, is just plotting a point. So it's telling you the steps, start at 0. This point is -3, 4. So from the 0, you're going to the -3. From that point, you're going to the +4. So you're moving 4 units up. This is where we're getting into combining the graphing with algebra. So this is back to algebra. It's just that occasionally you can get some shapes on the graph. So we're going to kind of blend the geometry and the algebra and do a little bit of that after we finish this 5.1. So this equation is for a straight line, and it's saying there are several different ways to represent a line in a coordinate plane by describing the points that form the line. This is like a translation when we were doing that with algebra. So what they're saying is the verbal description, y is 3 more than twice x, is just going to be translated into an equation. So they have the y, the word is going to be an equal sign. 3 more is going to be plus 3, and then twice x is 2x. So this becomes the equation for the line, and then making a table looks like what's at the bottom of the page. Every time you have an x, you can figure out what the y would be if you do that 2x plus 3. So if x is 0, then 2 times x would be 0, plus 3 would be 3. If x is 1, then you're saying 2 times 1 is 2, plus 3 would be 5. If x is 2, then you're saying 2 times 2 is 4, plus 3 would be 7. So this chart is describing the same line with examples of x, and these are going to be your points on the graph. So it would be 0, 3, 1, 5, or 2, 7. Any questions about that so far? So it's just really showing, looking at an equation, looking at a table. If we take a look at this that's in the corner, it says points in quadrant 1 are plotted by starting at 0, 0, moving to the right, and then moving up. So what we said about quadrant 1 is this is the chart that you might have on a lot of different tests if both of the numbers are positive. So what you're saying is to the right is going to be positive and up is going to be positive. These movements correspond to an ordered pair with a positive x coordinate and a positive y coordinate. Therefore, all points in quadrant 1 have positive coordinates. And what we were saying is you might just get a question that says, which quadrant is, 2, 4 in? What you're thinking to yourself is both of those are positive numbers, so it had to be to the right and up. So it's going to be in quadrant 1. Even if you're not looking at a picture, you're saying basically what's in this picture to yourself. Moving right means positive, moving up means positive, so it's going to be quadrant 1. Now, what we already talked about yesterday and saw in Math is Fun is what is true about the signs of the coordinates in points, the coordinates of points in quadrants 2, 3, and 4. So you're thinking about the same thing. If I go to quadrant 2, I went negative first and up. So I should have a negative number and a positive number. If I'm in quadrant 3, I went negative, I went to the left, and I went down. So that should be 2 negative numbers. And then in quadrant 4, I went to the right, so that the first one should be positive, but I still went down, so the second one should be negative. So all this is really saying is you have a feel for all 4 quadrants, and you know whether or not it's going to be a negative x or a positive y, just by the description of the ordered pair. So coming to the next page, there is graphs. And what we said is you can take the x and the y from a table, and then you can just plot them on a graph. So now that you know how to plot, if you have 0, 3, you're going to put a point there. If you have 1, 5, you're putting a point there. If you have 2, 7, you're putting a point there. And once you have more than one point, like we said from geometry, you can connect the points and make a line. So you can start to see a pattern of a line. So taking a look at this Think About Math, it says which ordered pair represents solutions to the equation of the line. So what they're saying is when we looked at this line as an equation, the solutions are the 0 and the 3. So the true solution is the 3 because it's saying y is. So what you're looking for, if they ask you what is a solution to the line, the points have to be on the line because we're looking at this formula right here in this table. It says x in one column and then it has y in the other column, but they're telling you how to find the y is 2x plus 3. So when they rewrote it, they have this table where it just has x and it just has y. There's no equation. So there's no y equals, but you can see the answer is still 3. So the representation of that is this graph, 0, 3, 1, 5, 2, 7. Those are all solutions to the equation. So here, when they're asking you which ordered pair represents the solution to the equation of the line, you don't have to really see the equation, but you should be able to see -4, 6, -2, 4, 2, -6, 4, -4. And what you're saying is which one or ones of these pairs are actually going to fall in a line. So if you look at -4, 6, you're going to go from the origin over to the -4 and up to the 6. So is that point on the line?
Yes.
Yes, so A is definitely an answer. Now you're going to -2, +4. Is that point on the line?
No, no.
No, so then it's not a solution. Now you're at +2, -6. Is that point on the line?
Yes.
So then that is a solution. So far you have A and C as the answers. Then you have +4 and then -4. Is that on the line?
No.
No. So in this case, when your question says which ordered pair or the parentheses S, they're saying which ordered pair or pairs. So if the first answer is A, you don't want to just go on to the next question. Because they put the S in the parentheses, that means there could be more than one correct answer. So just like when you take your test, if it says check all that apply or check 2, check 3, you really want to make sure that you go through all of the choices that you have and eliminate the ones that don't apply. But sometimes there are 2 answers or 3 answers that they're asking for. So now number 2 says which ordered pair or pairs could be in a table of values for the line. So now you're going to think about the same thing. You're looking at this line. Is -6, 6 on the line?
No.
Is 0, -2 on the line?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. Is 3, -8 on the line?
Yes.
Is 6, -6 on the line?
No.
So then in this one, we would have B and C as the correct answers. So any questions about this Think About math?
No.
No.
All right, so now we're moving on to the slope. So all of this was kind of like what we talked about yesterday, really just plotting a point and making sure you know the quadrants go counterclockwise. Now we're getting to a formula for slope. So they're talking about the pitch of a roof is a ratio that describes how steep the roof is. A pitch is, or a pitch of 4 to 12, for example, means the roof rises 4 inches vertically for every 12 inches of horizontal run. You can also use the ratio of vertical change to horizontal change to describe the steepness of a line in the coordinate plane. This ratio is called slope. So you can't really see it too well because this is a copy of a copy. But the picture here is a ski slope. So it gives you something to think about, is the steepness of the hill that you're going on. This other analogy that they're bringing up is the pitch of a roof, or how steep the roof is. So before you go over the actual formula as an equation, they're just talking about rise over run. So the rise is going to be, or rise or fall, is how far up or down the line goes. And the run is how far over the line goes. So just by looking at a line, you want to know whether or not it's positive, negative, or a 0 slope. On Math is Fun, it has a little guy on a bicycle and you're kind of thinking negative is going down the hill, no slope means you're just flat on the street, and a positive slope is going up the hill. So what you want to do when you're looking at slope is think about, excuse me, think about the line from left to right still. So like we said, sometimes when you're looking at shapes or you're looking at, you know, pictures, your mind can just have a preference and go from top to bottom, left to right, up and down. Everybody's going to be different the way that we look at things until it comes to reading. And even then, different languages are read in different ways. Some languages are read up and down. Some languages are read right to left. We're reading in English from left to right, and that's how you want to look at all of these lines so that you really see if it's negative, that means that you started high up at the left and you went down. So you should be able to look at the line from left to right and tell, is it going down? Is it staying flat? Or is it going up? The other thing that could happen is it could just be, like we said, the elevator style. Like it could stay on the Y line and just go up and down and never have a slant. So what we're looking at on the handout is, if you have a positive line, the line rises from the left and has positive slope. If you're looking at a negative line, the line will fall from left to right and it has a negative slope. If you're just looking at a horizontal line, there is no slope. So it's going to be 0. If it's just up and down, it is undefined. So if it is the elevator style, then it's just undefined. So now we're finally getting to the formula that is on the task practice portal. And that is that down at the bottom, they have the letter M for slope on the task portal. But here they're writing out the word right now because they're just introducing it. So the way that you find the slope is to just figure out what is the rise divided by the run. So in order to figure out the rise, you need 2 points. So that's what this picture is showing is, let me pick out a X comma Y, and that's my first point. So I put 2 1s with those coordinates. Then let me find another point that's on the line, and that's my second point. So I have another XY that it has a small 2 as the subscript. So that's all that the 1 and the 2 mean, is just for you to make sure that you keep your points organized. So in this case, you're going to say the second point minus the first point will tell me how far I traveled on the line. So I'm going to put the 2 rises together. So I'm going to say this this Y2 minus the Y1, that will tell me how far up I went. This X2 minus the X1 will tell me how far over I went. So this is just the formula in algebra, or you can just remember rise over run. Even with this though, I would say, decide which one you always want to focus on so that you stay organized. So we're saying that X and Y is alphabetical order, but rise and run is the opposite of that, where the Y is going to be on top. So when you're looking at your 2 coordinates, you want to make sure to yourself, if you always want to start with X, which that's a great idea. If you want to keep it simple and say, hey, I'm always looking at the X first. I'm going to process the denominator first. I'm going to look at the run first and process those 2 numbers. And then I will do the Y, right? So the only reason that I'm saying this is because you might only get, like we said, 1 or 2 of these, and you want to do it the same way all the time. The other thing is you have the formula on the task portal reference sheet. So you can just look at it as straight algebra and do the replacing. If you're looking for the X, you replace it with the X1. If you're looking for the second X, you replace it with the X2. So whatever you think is the most straightforward for you, but this is the formula that you want to memorize. So now we're just going to look at example number 2. How do you find the slope? The first thing you have to do is pick out 2 points from a line. So the slope of the line is going to be the same no matter which 2 points you pick out, because it's just the steepness of a line. If the line is straight, then nothing's going to change. It just has a pattern of increasing. So it doesn't matter which 2 points you pick out. So I would pick out 2 easy points. So looking at step number 1, if you look at this line, there are some points that are, like if I tried to pick out a point right here, I have to guess about where this actually is on the grid. But if I pick a point that's perfectly on the line, then I can say this is 2, 1. I don't have to guess about it being like halfway in between one of the numbers. So that's what I mean is if you have to identify the 2 points, you might as well pick out 2 easy points for yourself and say, okay, this one is perfectly at 2, 1, and this one is perfectly at 6, -4. Is that making sense? Then you don't have to deal with decimals, fractions. You're looking for the point that you can clearly say is a whole number, if that's possible for you. After you pick out 2 points, then you want to put those 2 points into the formula. So the formula was rise or run in words, or it's the second y minus the first y, the second x minus the first x. So what they have is a x and a y, and a x and a y. And you can already tell that this line is going down. So again, in multiple choice, you might have 2 answers that are positive and 2 answers that are negative. If all you remember is that this is a negative slope, you should be picking out one of the negative answers. So you're still using the strategy of predicting. As soon as you look at it, you're like, okay, this is definitely a negative slope. So can I pick out the answer right away from A, B, C, and D? Maybe 3 of them are positive and 1 of them is negative. I don't have to do any of the algebra then because it's obviously a negative slope. In this case, you had to just evaluate. So they're saying the second y minus the first y. So this is the first one because we're reading from left to right. So the -4 minus 1 are the 2 y's. The 6 minus 2 are the 2 x's. So this is where you do have to remember how to subtract negatives, because now that we're on all 4 parts of the coordinate plane, you might have some negative numbers. So what you have to remember is the formula is already subtraction. So say you had -4 minus a -1 for some reason. You have to remember that minus turns to plus because the regular formula is already a subtraction sign. So in that case, you want to use your parentheses if you do have some negative numbers and make sure you're following the rule for subtracting negatives. So in this case, it's just -4 minus 1 is a -5, and then 6 minus 2 is 4. So your answer is -5/4. And then perhaps they could have put 1 1/4 or 1.25. So you also might have to, maybe we'll review, or I'll put it as extra for you to just refresh fractions, decimals, and percent again. So any questions so far about example number 2?
So when I get ready to do the subtraction, I'll have to change from -5 to +5 and drop my negative quotient, make it positive automatically, or what it is.
Not in this case. I was just saying that if you had a different line where for some reason you had 2 negatives, you have to remember that the formula is already a minus sign. So sometimes just off of a visual, people can forget that the formula is y2 minus y1. If y2 and y1 are both negatives, it is gonna change to addition. So let me write that down on the whiteboard. So for example, if you just had -5 minus a -2, the rule for subtracting negatives is you're acting like this is an imaginary 1, right? So you're going to distribute. A negative times a negative turns into a positive.
Well, that's right. I forgot.
Or you're just saying, like how I said, I remember when I say -5 minus, I'm looking at 2 negatives in a row. I'm imagining those 2 negatives making a plus sign. So that's a cue for myself verbally and visually that 2 minuses are going to change into addition. So the formula is y2 minus y1, but in actual evaluating, you might end up doing addition if you have two negatives. So that's what I'm saying is you want to make sure that if this is the y2 and this is the y1, you're saying to yourself, I have a -2, let me make sure I put that in parentheses, because the regular formula is already to have a minus sign in between. So I don't want to write the minus sign and just kind of like, you know, a typo, an oversight. I don't want to say, oh, that belongs to the negative. The minus sign in the middle is the formula of doing subtraction. But sometimes that subtraction is going to change to being addition. So this is just, you know, practicing your algebra skills. You want to just look at it as substitution and evaluation. Now this one was finding the slope from a graph. If you don't get a graph and you get the table, then you're doing the same thing. The X row or the X column is where you're going to find your coordinate for X. The Y column is where you're going to find your coordinate for Y. So if they give you a table with 3 or 4 or 5 coordinates, you still only need to pick out 2. Does that make sense? They're just giving you extra. So the slope should still be the same. So what you're doing is the same thing, saying which number should I pick out? One of the reasons why people pick out like one like the first one is what we were just saying. They're picking an easy number because it has a 0. It's going to make the subtraction easy, right? So they started out with the formula up at the top. Slope is the rise over the run, and now they're going to figure it out. So if they have -4, 0, the first y is 0. If they have this other one that they picked out, 6, 5, the second y is 5. So here they just replaced the y's and the x's. 5 minus 0 is 5. And then this is an example of 6 minus -4 is actually how much?
Mom?
What is 6 minus a -4?
It gotta be 2.
2.
Yeah, 2. Goes positive 2.
Nope.
10.
So -10?
Right, so 6 is +10. 6 minus a -4 is what we were just saying. That minus is going to turn to plus. Or you're thinking you're distributing the negative symbol in front of those parentheses. So a negative times a negative is a positive. However you want to think about it, it's really however you're just going to describe the rule. So the negative on the outside of parentheses, the same way that we distribute numbers. So let's see. We might say if there's a 5 on the outside, we end up distributing the 5 and say 5 times a -2 is a -10. 5 times a +1 is a +5. So this is where we're saying that negative, positive, minus, plus, it's all the same thing, right? We just have a preference when we're reading. If I were to read this, I would say 5 times the sum of a -2 and a 1, or and a +1, or +1, right? We have a lot of ways that we can choose to read it. But when you're doing the math, you're saying 5 times a -2 is a -10. 5 times a +1 is a +5. So in this case,
It's 5.
what you really have is they just took it to 1/2 immediately. But what you would have had in between, if I was writing it out on the board or you're writing it on your scrap paper, is 5 minus 0 is 5. 10 minus a -4, I'm sorry, 6 minus a -4 is 10. So 5 over 10 is how they're saying it's 1/2. Any questions about that one?
No.
No.
All right, so now it says to find the slope of a line from an equation, use the equation to find 2 points of the line. So far they're just talking about different ways to find slope. So this one that they're giving us is 12x plus 3y equals 6. So when x is 0, y is a 2. And then they're showing the slope formula. When y is 0, x is a half. So they have 1/2 comma 0. And they're just putting these points into the formula and then coming up with the answer. So what we're going to do real quick is just look at it on Math is Fun, the same thing. And then the last thing that you'll have is just doing this Math is Fun quiz. So on Math is Fun, they have a grid, but it's not even, they have a coordinate plane, but it's not even necessarily marked in this first one. You can just count the boxes in order to see, this is 1 point right here. How far over did I go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be my x. How far up did I go? 1, 2, 3. So it's going to turn into 3/5. You can also do something interactive, which I would recommend you do just so that you can see how things change, right? So if you go to a very steep line, you're seeing how the slope is different. If you go to an almost flat line, you're seeing how, you know, the slope changes. But again, if you're picking those points that are perfectly on the grid, it makes it easy. So this one is 2, 3, 10, 4. It makes it easy to figure out what the slope is with, you know, just counting. But what they're saying is if I had these 2 points, I would have gone over 8 and up 3. So my slope is 3/8. Coming down a bit, they just have those examples. If you go over 3 and up 3, the slope is 1 because you're going to end up with 3/3. If you go over 2 and up 4, the slope is 2 because you're going to end up with 4/2. So this is a review of fractions and a review of negative numbers. The flatter you're getting, you went over more and, you know, up less. So you ended up with 3/5. So now you're at a decimal. Here you had a higher numerator, so you're at more than one whole number. And then here the numerator and the denominator is the same, so you're at 1. Any questions about that? That's like, you know, basic fractions, but we can go to the fraction index and just review that. So now they have what we already talked about, the negative, no slope, or the positive, and you're doing the same thing. How far down did you go? Was 4, so it's a -4. How far over did you go? Was 2, but still what you're saying here is a -4 divided by a +2. You have to remember the rules for dividing negatives also. So -4 divided by +2 is still going to make you have a negative slope. And you should have a negative slope. Looking at this line, you should be expecting it to be negative. So if you accidentally say -4 and a -2, you're going to end up with a positive slope. And then that's how you know maybe you made a mistake. So how far over is 5? How far up or down? 0. So the answer is you have a 0 slope, but you don't even have to do the math on one like this because you're just going by the visual. If it's a straight horizontal line, it's a 0 slope. And then Math is Fun is talking about the undefined line. If it's a straight vertical line, then it's undefined. And this is like the elevator style. It's just going up 3, but it didn't actually have a slope because a slope is a slant. So now they're showing you that M is what they're calling the slope. So this is where they show the formula again, that M is going to equal the rise over the run. So when you look at these questions, you can use the grid. There's no numbers. It's just saying, what is the slope of this line? Now, automatically, is this a negative line or a positive line?
Positive.
Positive. So you're eliminating A and B. It can't be A or B. But now you're saying to yourself, if I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go up 1, 2, is that 1/2 or is that 2?
That's 2.
Nope, it's 1/2.
Oh.
So now when you do it, this is why I'm saying you always have to make sure you're doing it the exact same way. Now I'm choosing to go with X. If I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, X, that 4 is my denominator.
Okay.
When I go up 2, the 2 is my numerator. So basically I'm gonna get 2 over 4 that I have to recognize is 1/2. But if I count those same numbers, but I flip the order, I am gonna say it's 4 over 2, and I'll pick out 2. So you have to make sure if you want to do the rise and fall first, then you're going to do the numerator first. If you always want to do the run first, you're going to do the denominator and the X first. So that's completely your decision. Whatever you decide today, though, you're going to keep doing it like that all the time. So this is what you're going to do is this 10-question quiz. Take the screenshot and upload it when you submit the assignment. The assignment is what we already did. So do the reading up to page 154. The one thing that we didn't do was to think about math at the bottom of 154. And really it's just one question that says, order the lines from the least slope to the greatest slope. So you're gonna figure that one out and we'll just go over that one tomorrow. And then just do the quiz on math is fun, which is the counting style. So this one is like the introduction. If you look at, number 2, you still have the same thing where you're looking at the line and counting. Number 3, number 4, 5 is like that. Now number 6, it is on a grid with some numbers, so you have to pick out the points, but you can, because it's on a grid, you can still count. So it's your choice. Still same thing, I would pick this one. It's not even necessarily important that I know this number. If I also pick like this one, I can just pick these 2 points that are perfectly on the grid and figure out the slope. Or I can say to myself, I'm gonna figure out what this number is and call it, X1 and Y1, figure out what this number is and call it X2 and Y2. But what I'm automatically looking at is this is a negative line. So all of those things that I'm seeing visually is helping me pick out A, B, C, or D. So those are the 10 questions. So you can really use the grid for all of these and just count the slope. All you're practicing is the positive and negative, of course, and making sure you put the right thing at the numerator and the right thing at the denominator. So let me just stop recording.